The explosion rocked the medical bay, sending medical equipment flying in all directions as the Andromeda-class transport ship shuddered violently. First Officer Frank Vorley grabbed the nearest rail to steady himself, smoke billowing around him from the ruptured plasma conduit that had just blown apart mere feet away. "Status report!" Frank shouted through the comm system, his right arm engulfed in searing heat where superheated plasma had splashed across his skin. "Engine room contained breach, sir," came the anxious voice of Engineering Chief Tallow. "But we have injured personnel in medical, several wounded." Frank glanced down at his arm. The flesh was angry red, blistered in several places where the plasma had made direct contact with his skin. The pain was intense, but nothing he hadn't experienced before during his 15 years in the interstellar fleet. This was just another day at the office. "I'm already in medical," he replied, making his way toward the main examination room. "I'll check on Dr. Gaxil." The ship's medical bay doors slid open with a hiss, revealing a scene of controlled chaos. 3 of the ship's alien medical staff, 2 Arcturians and 1 Zephyrian, were bustling around attending to minor injuries from the explosion. In the center of the room stood Chief Medical Officer Gaxil, a tall, slender Valaxian with pale blue skin and large, almond-shaped eyes. He was examining a crewman with a cut on his forehead. "Doctor," Frank called, approaching the medical officer. "Anyone seriously hurt?" Gaxil turned, his eyes immediately locking onto Frank's burned arm. The alien physician's pupils dilated dramatically, a sign of extreme alarm in Valaxian physiology. "First Officer Vorley!" Gaxil exclaimed, his voice reaching a pitch Frank had never heard before. "Your arm! Emergency Protocol Vetra 9 immediately!" Frank looked down at his arm again. "It's just a scratch, doctor. I've had worse from cooking breakfast." Gaxil's blue skin seemed to pale further as he abandoned his current patient and rushed to Frank's side. "Scratch? Scratch?" The alien's voice modulator was practically screeching now. "This is a level 4 plasma burn. Velos, Zyrax, emergency burn protocol, now!" The 2 Arcturian medics rushed over, their 4-fingered hands already holding various medical instruments. One took one look at Frank's arm and promptly collapsed to the floor with a loud thud. Frank stared down at the unconscious alien medic. "Is he okay?" "Velos has a sympathetic neural response to severe trauma," Gaxil explained hurriedly, guiding Frank to the main medical bed. "Please lie down immediately, First Officer." "Doctor, really, I can still perform my duties. It's just a—" "If you say scratch one more time, I will sedate you myself," Gaxil interrupted, his voice trembling with what Frank recognized as a mix of fear and medical authority. "This burn covers 17% of your upper limb, with potential 3rd-degree damage to subcutaneous tissue." Frank reluctantly sat on the medical bed, while Zyrax, the remaining Arcturian medic, approached with a tray of medical instruments. The alien's hands were visibly shaking. "I've never seen a human continue to function with such severe tissue damage," Zyrax murmured, scanning the burn with a medical tricorder. "The pain receptors are clearly activating, yet he shows minimal distress response." Zyrax leaned in closer to examine the burn, then suddenly swayed on his feet. Gaxil quickly grabbed a nearby chair and positioned it behind his colleague, just as Zyrax's knees buckled. "Not you too," Gaxil muttered as the second medic slumped into the chair, consciousness fading. "Is this normal for them?" Frank asked, genuinely curious now. "I didn't think my burn was that bad." Gaxil called over the Zephyrian medic, a shorter alien named Fixa with scaly green skin. "Prepare the dermal regenerator and pain management protocol Alpha 7. Fixa took one glance at Frank's arm, her reptilian eyes widening dramatically. That is... "Focus, Fixa," Gaxil urged. "The human's pain threshold is confounding your medical training. Remember your xenophysiology courses." Fixa took several deep breaths, which Frank noted was impressive, given the Zephyrian's complex 3-lung respiratory system. She prepared a hypo spray and approached Frank cautiously. "This will neutralize the pain signals," she explained, her voice still shaky. "Though how you are not screaming in agony is beyond my comprehension." The hypo spray hissed against Frank's neck, delivering a cool rush of analgesic compound into his bloodstream. The burning sensation in his arm immediately dulled to a faint throb. "Thanks," Frank said with a smile. "That feels better." Gaxel was already working on the burn with a dermal regenerator, the device humming softly as it began repairing the damaged tissue layer by layer. "First Officer Vorley, I must insist you explain how you are maintaining such composure. By Valaxian standards, this level of burn would cause shock and potentially death without immediate treatment." Frank shrugged with his good shoulder. "Humans are pretty tough when it comes to pain, Doctor. We evolved on a planet with lots of predators and environmental hazards. Pain is just information to us." Fixa, who had recovered some of her professional composure, was now monitoring Frank's vitals on a nearby screen. His endorphin levels are remarkably high, and his neural pathways are showing unusual dampening patterns around the pain centers. "It's called compartmentalization," Frank explained. "We can sort of put the pain in a box mentally, especially when we need to function to help others." Gaxel shook his head in disbelief as he continued the treatment. "In my 15 years as a xenophysician, I have never encountered a species with such disturbing pain response." On the floor, Velos was beginning to stir, blinking his large eyes rapidly as he regained consciousness. He took one look at Frank's arm, which was now partially healed, but still visibly damaged, and promptly fainted again. Frank couldn't help but chuckle. "Maybe you should tell him to look the other way." "This is not humorous, First Officer," Gaxel admonished, though Frank detected a hint of fascination in the doctor's voice. "Your species' ability to endure physical trauma without appropriate physiological response is both medically fascinating and deeply concerning." As Gaxel continued treatment, the ship's intercom buzzed. "First Officer Vorley, please report your status," came the captain's voice. "I'm fine, Captain," Frank replied. "Just getting patched up in medical. I'll be back on the bridge and—" "You most certainly will not," Gaxel interrupted, pressing a button to include himself in the communication. "Captain Trell, First Officer Vorley has sustained a severe plasma burn, requiring at minimum 6 hours of dermal regeneration and cellular reconstruction. He is relieved of duty for the next 24 hours. There was a pause before Captain Trell responded. "Understood, Doctor. First Officer, follow medical orders. Trell out." Frank sighed, resigning himself to being confined to medical bay. 6 hours seems excessive, Doctor." Gaxel's expression was unyielding as he adjusted the regenerator's settings. "By your human standards, perhaps, but I am the Chief Medical Officer, and I will treat this injury according to proper medical protocol." Frank nodded, recognizing the universal truth that across all species in the galaxy, one never argued with the doctor. Several hours later, Frank's arm was showing remarkable improvement. The regenerator had repaired most of the damaged tissue, though the skin remained pink and sensitive. Gaxel was reviewing the latest scan results while Fixa applied a cooling gel to the area. Velos had finally recovered enough to assist, though he carefully avoided looking directly at Frank's injury. Xerax was back on duty as well, monitoring Frank's vital signs with fascination. "Your recovery rate exceeds our projections," Xerax noted. "Human cellular regeneration capabilities are impressive when paired with our technology." "Thanks," Frank replied, flexing his fingers experimentally. "See? Good as new. I told you it was just a do not say it," Gaxel warned, raising a blue finger. "That was not a minor injury by any medical standard in the known galaxy." The medical bay doors slid open as Captain Trell entered. The Forian captain's crystalline exoskeleton glimmered under the medical bay lights as he approached Frank's bed. "First Officer," Trell's voice resonated from his speech membrane. "How are you feeling?" "I'm doing well, Captain," Frank replied. "Ready to return to duty." Gaxel made a sound that Frank had learned was the Valaxian equivalent of an exasperated sigh. "Captain, while First Officer Vorley's condition has improved, I strongly recommend at least 12 more hours of rest and observation. Captain Trell's crystalline structure shifted slightly, indicating acknowledgement. Dr. Gaxhill, I've received a rather unusual request from the Medical Academy on Proxima Station. They're asking for a detailed report on First Officer Vorley's injury and treatment. Apparently, word has spread about his unusual reaction to the plasma burn. Frank raised an eyebrow. Word spread already? How? Xerax looked slightly embarrassed, his skin flushing a deeper blue. I might have mentioned it to my colleague at the academy during my break. The xenophysiology department has been studying human pain responses for years. Great, Frank muttered. Now I'm going to be a medical curiosity. You already are, Fixa said matter-of-factly. The medical database on humans is still relatively limited compared to other species in the Federation. Your ability to withstand significant pain while remaining functional is particularly noteworthy. Captain Trell moved closer to the medical bed. The Academy has requested permission to conduct a more thorough study when we dock at Proxima Station in 2 days. They're particularly interested in human pain tolerance and recovery rates. Frank grimaced. So I'm going to be a lab rat? Only if you consent, Gaxhill assured him, though I must admit the data would be valuable for treating human patients in the future. Frank considered this. If his unusual pain tolerance could help develop better treatments for humans throughout the galaxy, perhaps it was worth the discomfort of being studied. I'll think about it, he finally said. Captain Trell nodded. Very well. In the meantime, follow Dr. Gaxhill's orders. The captain turned to leave, but paused at the door. And Vorley? Next time, perhaps try showing a bit more pain. I think you traumatized half the medical staff. As the captain left, Frank looked around at the alien medical team still hovering nearby, their expressions a mix of concern, fascination, and lingering shock. Was it really that bad? He asked Gaxhill. The Valaxian doctor carefully adjusted a monitor before responding. First Officer, in my species, that level of burn would cause such excruciating pain that most Valaxians would enter a protective coma. The Arcturians, he gestured to Velos and Xerax, have pain receptors 3 times more sensitive than humans, and even Zephyrians, he nodded toward Fixa, with their protective scales, would be incapacitated by such an injury. Frank nodded slowly, beginning to understand. So when I walked in calling it a scratch, you might as well have walked in with a severed limb asking for a bandage, Gaxhill concluded. To us, your behavior was not just surprising, it was terrifying. Over the next day, Frank remained in the medical bay under observation. His arm continued to heal well, though occasional twinges of pain reminded him that the injury had been more serious than he'd initially acknowledged. During this time, he learned more about the alien medical staff's perception of human physiology. Fixa had brought him research articles about human pain response studies, fascinating reading that helped pass the time. According to this, Frank said, reviewing one article, humans have a documented ability to ignore pain signals in emergency situations that would incapacitate most other intelligent species. Correct, Fixa confirmed, checking his latest vital signs. There are theories that it's related to your species' evolution as persistence hunters. The ability to continue functioning despite injury was a survival advantage. Xerax joined the conversation, having gradually overcome his initial distress. What's most remarkable is your conscious control over pain perception. Most species experience pain as an overwhelming signal that cannot be ignored. It's a fundamental survival mechanism. But for humans, Gaxhill added, entering the room with fresh scan results, pain seems to be more negotiable. Frank smiled. That's a good way to put it. We can't turn it off completely, but we can decide how much attention to give it. Gaxhill examined Frank's arm, nodding with satisfaction at the healing progress. Your burn is healing exceptionally well. I believe you can return to limited duty tomorrow, provided you continue the regenerative treatments for another 3 days. Thanks, Doctor, Frank said, genuinely grateful for the care he'd received. And I'm sorry if I scared everyone by downplaying the injury. In human culture, we tend to minimize our injuries sometimes. A fascinating cultural trait, Gaxel remarked, though medically problematic. The following morning, Frank was cleared to return to limited duty. As he prepared to leave the medical bay, Valos approached him somewhat hesitantly. First Officer Vorley, the Arcturian medic, began. "I wish to apologize for my unprofessional reaction to your injury." Frank shook his head. "No apology needed. I understand now how it must have looked from your perspective." Velos shifted uncomfortably. "May I ask a personal question?" "Of course." Did it truly not cause you significant distress? The burn?" Frank considered how to answer honestly. "It definitely hurt quite a lot, actually. But humans have developed a sort of psychological distance from pain. We acknowledge it, but don't let it control us completely." Velos looked both disturbed and fascinated. "That is both admirable and concerning." 2 days later, the Andromeda docked at Proxima Station. As promised, representatives from the Medical Academy were waiting to meet with Frank. After discussing the research protocols with Gaxel and Captain Trell, Frank agreed to participate in a limited study. The research center was a marvel of modern medical technology, with equipment Frank had never seen before. The lead researcher, a Tellurian named Dr. Mira, with iridescent skin that shifted colors with her emotions, greeted him warmly. "First Officer Vorley, thank you for agreeing to this study. The data we gather could significantly improve treatment protocols for humans throughout Federation space." Frank nodded, trying to hide his nervousness as he surveyed the various scanning devices and monitoring equipment. "Happy to help. Just no intentional burns for research purposes, right?" Dr. Mira's skin flashed a bright yellow Tellurian amusement. "I assure you, we will only be conducting non-invasive scans and a few sensory response tests. Nothing that would cause significant discomfort." The tests lasted several hours. They measured Frank's neural responses to various stimuli, recorded his brain activity while he recalled the pain of the plasma burn, and compared his results to baseline data from other human subjects. During a break between tests, Dr. Mira shared some preliminary findings. "Your pain threshold is actually within normal human parameters, First Officer. What's extraordinary is your pain tolerance, your ability to function despite experiencing pain that would be debilitating to most other species." "Is that unusual among humans?" Frank asked. "Not entirely," Dr. Mira replied, her skin shifting to a thoughtful blue hue. "But you're certainly on the higher end of the scale. Your particular ability to compartmentalize pain signals is especially pronounced." After completing the tests, Frank rejoined Gaxiel and the medical team from the Andromeda for a debriefing session. "The Academy researchers were quite impressed with your pain management abilities," Gaxiel told him. "They've asked for permission to include your case study in their teaching materials for xenophysician training." Frank chuckled. "Famous for getting burned. Not exactly how I plan to make my mark on the medical community." Fixa, who'd been reviewing the research data, looked up. "It's more significant than you realize, First Officer. Understanding how humans process pain could lead to breakthroughs in treating chronic pain conditions across multiple species." "Indeed," Gaxel agreed. "Your scratch, as you so inappropriately called it, has provided valuable insights." The following day, the Andromeda prepared to depart Proxima Station. Frank, now fully recovered except for a slight pinkness to his skin where the burn had been, resumed his duties on the bridge. Captain Trell approached him as he completed the pre-launch checks. "How's the arm, First Officer?" "Good as new, Captain," Frank replied, flexing his arm to demonstrate. "Dr. Gaxel does excellent work, even if he's a bit dramatic about human injuries." The captain's crystalline structure shifted in what Frank recognized as amusement. "I've received a formal communication from the Medical Academy. They're developing new protocols for treating human patients based partially on data from your case." "Glad something good came out of it," Frank said. "There's something else," Captain Trell continued. "They've recommended that all ships with human crew members update their medical training to account for what they're calling human injury underreporting syndrome." Frank laughed out loud. They named a syndrome after us, downplaying our injuries. Indeed, apparently it's a recognized behavioral pattern that has been observed across human populations. The tendency to describe potentially serious injuries as just a scratch or only a flesh wound is now officially documented in the xenomedical literature. As the Andromeda broke orbit and set course for its next destination, Frank couldn't help but smile at the irony. His simple human reaction to pain had caused such a stir among the alien medical community. In the weeks that followed, Frank noticed subtle changes in how the medical staff interacted with human crew members. They had developed a more nuanced approach to assessing human injuries, learning to look beyond what was reported verbally and paying closer attention to physical signs. One evening, as Frank completed his shift and headed for the recreation deck, he encountered Gaxel in the corridor. "First officer," the doctor acknowledged him with a nod. "How's your arm feeling?" Frank rotated his shoulder, demonstrating the full range of motion. "Completely healed thanks to you and your team." Gaxel studied him for a moment. "I've been reviewing more human medical literature since your incident. Your species has a fascinating relationship with pain. In many human cultures, there seems to be social value placed on enduring pain without complaint." "That's true for many of us," Frank acknowledged, "especially in military and emergency services. Showing too much distress over an injury can sometimes be seen as weakness." Gaxel's expression was unreadable to human eyes, but his voice carried a note of concern. "From a medical perspective, this cultural trait is potentially dangerous. Pain is a critical biological signal." "I understand that," Frank said. "But for humans, pain is also negotiable. We can choose, to some extent, how we respond to it." "A remarkable evolutionary adaptation," Gaxel observed, "and one that will continue to challenge alien medical practitioners treating human patients." 6 months later, the Andromeda docked at Earth's orbital station for crew rotation and resupply. Frank took the opportunity to visit the planet's surface, spending time with family and friends he hadn't seen in over a year. During a dinner with his sister Emma, he shared the story of his plasma burn and the aliens' reaction to his casual dismissal of the injury. Emma laughed. "So you're telling me that alien doctors literally fainted when they saw your burn, and you called it a scratch?" "2 of them," Frank confirmed with a grin. "One collapsed completely, and the other nearly fell over. They'd never seen a human downplay an injury before." "That's hilarious," Emma said, shaking her head. "Remember when Dad cut his hand open with the power saw and just wrapped it in a kitchen towel to drive himself to the hospital?" "Exactly," Frank exclaimed. "He kept telling Mom it was just a nick, even though he needed 20 stitches. "It's just how we were raised," Emma noted. "Don't make a fuss, keep going, deal with it later." Frank nodded thoughtfully. The aliens find it completely baffling. To them, pain is absolute. If something hurts that badly, you stop and deal with it immediately. "Sounds reasonable, actually," Emma pointed out. "Maybe they have the right idea." "Maybe," Frank conceded. "Gaxel, our chief medical officer, says humans have a dangerous habit of ignoring important warning signals from our bodies." When Frank returned to the Andromeda, he brought with him a small gift for each member of the medical team, traditional healing herbs from various Earth cultures, packaged in decorative containers. Gaxel examined his gift lavender from the Mediterranean region with fascination. "This plant has actual medicinal properties?" "Minor ones," Frank explained. "It's used for relaxation and sleep mostly, but it's been part of human healing traditions for thousands of years." The Valaxian doctor seemed touched by the gesture. "Thank you, First Officer. This provides another window into your species' approach to medicine and healing." As the Andromeda prepared for its next mission, Frank reflected on how a painful injury had unexpectedly built bridges of understanding between himself and the alien medical staff. His scratch, as he'd so casually called it, had sparked genuine cultural exchange and medical research that would benefit both humans and aliens throughout the galaxy. The ship's new assignment would take them to the outer reaches of explored space, where they might encounter new species with their own unique physiologies and approaches to pain and healing. Frank found himself curious about what they would discover. In the meantime, he made a mental note to be more forthcoming about injuries in the future, at least when dealing with alien medical personnel. He couldn't promise to stop thinking of serious wounds as just scratches, but he could try to remember that not everyone in the galaxy shared humanity's peculiar relationship with pain. And perhaps, he thought, as the Andromeda broke orbit and accelerated toward the stars, there was something to learn from the alien perspective as well. Maybe pain wasn't always something to be ignored or pushed aside. Maybe sometimes it was worth acknowledging fully, without the brave face humans were so accustomed to wearing. As if to remind him of this lesson, his arm gave a phantom twinge where the plasma burn had been fully healed now, but not forgotten, either by his body or by the alien medical staff who had been so dramatically introduced to the confounding human pain response. Frank smiled to himself as he took his station on the bridge. The universe was vast and full of differences, physiological, psychological, cultural, but those differences, once understood, became opportunities for connection rather than barriers. And sometimes all it took was a human calling a third-degree plasma burn just a scratch to start a conversation that could echo across the stars.